his lesson. Alexi, we're about to start a different meeting now. I know they're doing something important.
Just 10 seconds ago.
That I waited till the moment, man. You also didn't show any real signs of breaking up. So welcome to IANABIS here at IETF 123. For those of you who are here with us in Madrid, thank you for coming. For those of you joining us online, thank you for being online with us. You will note we have the flag of the city of Madrid to represent our current placement. But we will be going back to the usual practice here of starting off by asking people to review or remember the note well, which gives the rules of participation here in the IETF. If you're not familiar with it, please become familiar with it before you contribute, because it is an important part of our making sure that we're all operating according to the same rules. We'd also like you to note really well that it's very important that we recognize that we're here for professional collaboration, and that it's important to treat each other with the respect due to our colleagues. If you have not reviewed this recently, please also review this. Any harassing behavior is definitely not going to be tolerated. You can raise it, if appropriate, with a working group chair, with an AD, or with the Ombuds team. And although I have teased Pete mercilessly about his willingness to be strive, I do want to thank him and the rest of the Ombuds team for their willingness to serve in that very important role here. Thanks very much. A reminder that the session is being recorded, and that if you're not familiar with how the MeetEcho tool is as used here at the IETF, please familiarize yourself with that. If you are a remote participant, please remember to keep yourself muted unless you're talking, because we will otherwise get feedback, which is problematic for all of us. Here are the resources. We have already taken care of the primary piece of administrivia, which is thanking Pete for his willingness to serve as scribe. The discussion of the agenda as posted on the list was very late. Our apologies as chairs for that. But the primary aim for this is to go through each of these documents, answer any questions that have been raised by the editors for the documents, and work through each of them during the course of this meeting on an issues basis. So there is one set of slides. Thank you, Amanda, for preparing those with the questions. But in general, our purpose here presumes you have read the documents and you are ready to talk about any issues or improvements with them, because our aim is to ask at the end of every single one of these, what is it going to take to get this to working group last call? And that's our real goal here, is to work us toward working group last call and eventually working group closure as quickly as possible. This is intended to be a fast-moving, short-lived group, and certainly we're an intimate one. It's good to see you all. That's the goal. So Amanda, would you ready now? Okay, so I will switch slides. Yep. If you'd like to take it and wander around, you don't have to stand there, but there is.
You gotta stay in the box.
Actually, she's not visible in the MeetEcho right now where she is. She need to go there to do that, so she can stay where she is if she wants. Okay.
I don't want to be visible. So we've got the three documents. 7120 bis, which hasn't changed since the last meeting. An early registry creation document, which a few people have looked at. We need someone to tell us how or if they think that might break, but no specific questions about that. We do want to note some specific things about 8126 bis as it stands that we'd like people to look at, or try to. We've left a few questions in place from 00, and then just offered up some text for the rest. The main questions are really about specification required. The big one, I think, is do IDs count? We had someone asking us that just today. Do we need other restrictions on specifications? And would this affect existing registries? Just reading them off, huh? Do we need to establish different levels, such as and how would we define those? That seems very tricky. Do we want to just leave it to the experts or registry creators as we do today? And there's the spec storage question. So about the proposed text, we discussed a little bit on the mailing list, this sort of chicken and egg issue with organizations that need values before they can publish. We proposed some text, but it seems a little conservative. I don't know how much it's helping anyone, but let's see, I'm trapped here. Maybe this needs a special kind of professional registration instead, regardless of what the organization is, or maybe we need a more inclusive list of organizations than just the liaisons. So if we could get some additional feedback there. Next slide, I think. I could try, but look at my legs. I don't know what's happening. Yep. If I could just sit on the floor, I think.
How's that?
More space.
Okay, just do you want to get through the whole presentation and then go back and take it page by page?
I think so.
Okay, so we'll take questions and comments at the end after she's gone through the whole set of questions, and then we'll return to page 1 and go through item by item. Thank you very much.
Okay, the first two are pretty straightforward. First come, first served with URL. A bad name, I think, but it's a requested procedure. With expert review, we do want to put that in this document. I know whether Karsten's document is published first, we're kind of agnostic there, but we also need to get it in here and need to know if we need more text. So the last one, we now have a subsection that combines talk about sort of range-specific registration procedures and provisional and permanent registration, and I think those would stay pretty much as they are. But then there's a different take on the procedure in John Clenson's document, which is called a hybrid procedure there. And that's an approach to combining what's being called an IETF procedure with a first-come, first-served style procedure. And that's something that's difficult to do for registries of strings, unless you either add a prefix to the less sort of privileged type of string, or create two separate registries for them, and the key to this proposal is that you add a column to the registry that tells you whether this is an IETF approved registry or a first come, first served one. The difference really between the two documents there is that document proposes that the IETF type of registration require a standards track or IETF stream experimental document specifically, or possibly informational if the ISG allows it. Whereas it seems to me that as long as you add that column, you could use an existing procedure like IETF review or IETF review with expert review. Which that does raise another question though, either way, which is should there be an additional standalone procedure, not part of the hybrid procedure, for requiring different subsets of types of IETF stream documents? Right now we have the standards action, but we don't have anything that's standards and experimental or experimental only. Last slide, I guess. So this slide just covers things we're not sure about or need text or ideas for. We're recommending people consider including a status column, for example, among other things. And here we listed some examples of status entries, not knowing really what to do with that, whether they should be defined here or grouped into sets somehow or not included at all. It also, relatedly, people have expressed an interest in seeing more comprehensive definitions of deprecated and obsolete. And we really think other people are better placed to define these and could use suggestions. Also, there's a subsection where we talk about how to tell us to host module files, but I don't know if that's really covering what people want us to cover there. And finally, as it says, we're providing information people are asking for in this, say, language and formatting section, but don't know if it's this maybe too trivial for this document. Should it belong in our online help page instead? And I think I'm free to go, right? Okay.
Okay, thanks very much for going through the slides. Now we'll start going through the discussion points that were raised in them. Those of you who are going to talk to them, please try and address whether you believe, first, that you have an answer to the question asked, and second, where you're confident where the answer should be lodged in our set of documents. So we want both as outputs, what the answer is, and a confirmation that it belongs in the current BIS document that's our focus, or it belongs in a different document. That's not so important for this one where it's clear, but kind of later on in the set of questions, it might get a little bit more important. So Karsten.
Carsten Bormann, yes, this document, and I'm answering the first question the way I understand it. Whether that is actually true depends on the registry. But we do have registries where they do count, and that should not be changed. And if you want to know more about this, click the link I put into the chat.
Thank you, Barry.
This is Barry Liebe. The answer to several of these points to specification required implies that there's an expert reviewer. And the reviewer is supposed to determine whether the specification is adequate for the purpose. So that kind of answers Karsten's thing as well. Whether IDs count is up to the expert reviewer. And I think the guidelines for all of that should be in the specification of the registry with the instructions to the expert reviewer. So whether there need to be other restrictions on specs, again, is the expert reviewer determines whether this is suitable, guided by the guidance that's in the document that created the registry. So that's what I think with all of the specification required is you're depending on the expert reviewer to validate the specification.
So let me just ask a quick follow-up question to folks here. I'm going to summarize Barry's comment on that is that IDs may count, and that it is up to the expert reviewer to determine whether they do count on a per registry basis. Okay, I got several people disagreeing with me, so obviously as a summary that was bad. Can people...
So can I just amend what you said? Yes. And the expert reviewer can be guided by the specification of the registry. And this is normally the case. Yeah, I think you said that we didn't.
Okay, thank you. Rich, did you have a different point to make? Get to the mic if so.
I think it's basically the same thing what Karsten said, not sure. If the specific, yeah, it's the working group decides, not the expert reviewer. And the working group will have decided by agreeing to the specification for the registry.
Okay, so let me try and summarize this again. Oh, no.
But within the IETF, there is controversy as to whether or not that is allowed. And so this document explicitly saying that that can be done.
Okay, Paul, and then I'm going to try and summarize one more time.
Okay, I'm agreeing with where we're at, but I want to note that there are many RFCs that specified registries that did not say this, and it has therefore become up to the expert. And in some cases that I'm aware of, people in the working group that created it have said the expert is doing it wrong, either by allowing drafts or not by allowing drafts. And we don't have a process for changing a registry, like what the expert should do. short of revising the RFC to fix the IANA Considerations section. I believe something that would be valuable for this draft would be to, as other folks have said, instantiate that and say, if there is disagreement with the expert reviewer, X shall happen. And I don't know what that is, but I believe that it could be talk to the ISG.
Okay, so we're still on point 1 of slide 1. So thanks, everybody. I think what I'm hearing is that the desire is for this document to say that IDs may count if the document which created the registry specified that they may, or wait until I'm finished before shaking your head, or it is the interpretation of the expert reviewer that the internet draft meets the requirements intended by the working group. Now, I have not heard anybody say IDs never count. Is there anybody in the room who believes that this document should say IDs are never permitted as a specification?
There are certainly people in the IETF.
I
maybe
didn't
not in
ask
this
whether
room.
somebody else had the opinion. I asked if there's anybody in
Okay.
this room. We will confirm on the mailing list and it'll go to IETF last call. But I don't want to hear about somebody else's opinion. I want if anybody wants to come to the mic right now and argue for that. Okay.
All of that summary you just said applies from my point of view to the first 3 bullets on this slide. And I'll note that there are several other people in the queue.
Okay. So Karsten's next and then Alexi.
Yeah, I think the important thing is the retroactive part, where the working group did not write anything in the specification. And in this case, we should have a reasonable default. And the reasonable default is we pay the expert reviewer a lot of money and they should make the decision. So if you don't like the expert reviewer, get a new expert reviewer. That also works.
Okay, so the queue online is kind of in a strange state because it has Barry, then Murray, then Paul. If you put yourself in queue and you've already spoken, please take yourself out of queue. Murray, are you next?
Yeah, I know this one.
So the part that I didn't say is if a new reference to specification required doesn't say anything about it, I would think we're exactly at the same place. So it's still the expert reviewer that makes the decision.
Except I think in this case, the document will have said that this is a permitted outcome that a working group may say that is a permitted specification.
Yes, but if the working group does not say anything because they don't care.
Then it's guided by the reviewer, as you say.
Thank you.
Alexi Murray is next.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So when I was on the ISG, this came up often because when a document is expired, we go out of our way to say, first of all, the boilerplate says an expired document has no value. Secondly, when you look at an expired document through the data tracker, there's yellow stuff all over the place saying this has no value. Why can we base a registration on something that will soon have these labels all over it saying this has no value, it's not valid for any purpose? So I understand the need that this is attempting to solve, but I think that if we were going to say that this is okay, we also need to go to the data tracker and the tools team and say, clear all that up. And we need to pay appropriate respect to why drafts have an expiration in the first place. And like, are we okay with throwing that away? It's been that way for as long as I've been doing this stuff. So it's not as simple as sort of changing the rules. A lot of other stuff needs to change too, like boilerplate.
So I will point out that is not in scope for this working group. It was great that you're not changing the data tracker UI is not in scope for this working group.
I agree, but then we'll be left in a place where there's a contradiction that needs to be resolved. So.
Yeah, and as the AD override, also not in scope is whether drafts expire or not. That's come to Procon after a future recharter.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
that will take place in a different working group if you wish to argue that point. The next person is Paul, then I have John, and then I have Peter and Alexi. You don't appear to be in the queue.
I'm not in the queue now. Not in.
Sorry, what?
I didn't put myself in the queue now. Do you want me to go to the?
I want you to put yourself in the queue because I said at the beginning that if we're going to run the queue that way.
Ted, someone said something earlier, and I forget who, because we're sort of getting a little bit heated, that I think is very important. which is the things we have just talked about are not just on the first bullet. They apply to at least the first three. That is, I think the same idea of a working group being able to specify what they want or doesn't want is not only about IDs, but it's also about other specs. I know it's almost never happened, but I think instead of us focusing on IDs, we should focus on documents that are specification required.
Thank you. I believe that echoes what Barry said. John.
Yeah, I first of all share what I think was part of Murray's concern, which is that independent of the policy questions about what we should do about it, we're in a silly state right now when we're referencing documents that in other places we say are to be disregarded. But more important, I have deep misgivings about experts making what amount to policy decisions in these areas. And this will probably extend into other topics because those decisions are often made in what amounts to secret. Registration occurs, expert looks at it, says, this is okay in spite of the fact that it's an ID, or this is okay in spite of the fact that it disagrees with some fundamental problem with the issue with the RFC specification itself. Let's go ahead. Registration occurs. Nobody notices until much later, so that disagreeing with the expert is not an issue, and that seems to me to be a problem. If the expert starts making those policy decisions, we should at least figure out a way to make them public. Not secret, but public. Thanks.
Okay, Peter. Alexia, I still don't see in the queue. Do you still want to get up? Okay. You're welcome to join the queue, Peter.
Okay, Peter Koch-Dienig. So I wonder whether the first question is actually one that would follow the zero question. And the zero question is, what's the purpose of requiring that specification? And what are the expectations towards the specification and the availability or duration of that availability? To the latter, the expert is usually assigned to judge on the content of the protocol, not so much on the availability of the specification. And the discussion about IDs going away or not can't be at the whim of an expert. The list of requirements should say, we want a specification because, and we expect the specification to fulfill this, which could include, for example, to explicit name who has change control over the specification and so on and so forth, if it is outside the IETF. So I think that that question is premature. The idea should be to make these questions explicit and respond to that, so that also the working groups are guided and just don't have to invent so many different policies that have differences at micro level that probably would make IANA's and the expert review, IANA's work and the experts' work more difficult. Thank you.
Paul, you're next.
Paul Hoffman. I sincerely disagree with something John Clenson said, which is this is a big problem. This isn't a big problem. It occasionally causes big problems that working groups or the ISG hear about, but I suspect it's on the order of once or twice a year. And we have, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, like 4,500 registries, which means we have like 10,000 expert. Well, no, there's overlap, but we have a zillion of these and they work reasonably well. To John's point about things are done in secret, well, no, it appears in the registry. Whether people paid attention to that is a different question. And I think that it is reasonable, not in this document, but somewhere to say working group chairs should be following the registries that their working groups created and noticing things. There might even be a tool or whatever, but that's explicitly not in scope for what IANA should be suggesting about registries.
So I have Barry, John, and Karsten, and as far as I can tell, we're still on item 1, which some people believe also encompasses 2 and 3.
Yes.
And at this rate of progress, I anticipate we will be finished sometime in
Next
2000
month.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want people to start congealing their thoughts into what text they would like to see in the document and sending that text to the mailing list as next steps, because I think we're actually a little closer than people have seemed to be in the line, but we need actual text to make the next level of progress after this. So Barry, John, Karsten, and then I'm going to try and formulate a.
I put my hand up to talk about bullet 4, but first I want to respond to something that Paul said, that I agree with Paul that this is not a big problem. But I think John Clenson's point about in secret is not that you can't see the results of what happened, but the discussion that went on is not publicly available, at least not readily. So, and I agree with that, that ought to be fixed. My point on number 4, the answer to that is I think yes, IANA should investigate this, but it's non-trivial because there are going to be times when we want to follow along with updates to the referred specification, and there are going to be times where we want to snapshot it and not follow updates, and that's going to be a difficult thing to deal with. And again, whether we do or don't do that would probably be up to the designated expert, but it makes that whole process a lot more complicated.
I'm sorry, I missed the conclusion. You don't have to restate it.
The conclusion is that I think they should investigate storing specs, but it's not going to be a trivial task to figure out what to do.
John.
Yeah, my definition of secret probably differs from Paul's, because I don't believe that everybody who has been responsible for creating a registry, the entire working group, or even its chairs, are watching every registry to see what happens with every registration. And my concern is ultimately about the question. I've got problems with IDs being referenced in general, but separately from that, I'm concerned about the question of an expert making the policy about whether or not IDs are going to be permitted, either in a particular situation or globally, without, for example, notifying the working group mailing list, even if the working group is closed, that decision was made. If there are questions about differences between IDs, then same issue about notification. Again, I don't like the idea of IDs being referenced at all. That clearly puts me out of the lunatic fringe, but I don't want to see that done on the basis that, well, everybody can look at every registry every day and see if there's been some change there, which could indicate a policy change relative to whatever the RFC said. And I think that's a significant problem if it happens once a year, if it happens twice a year, if it happens a dozen times a year. And you know, it's when we've got a protocol specification and somebody violates a must, we don't say that's okay, it only happened once a year.
Karsten.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a very brief point. There is no working group chair. The thing that we are talking about here happens at a time when the document has left the working group. The working group or the working group chair no longer have any influence on the process that is happening between the registrant, IANA, and the designated expert. And is that a bug or a feature? We can discuss this. I would again say almost never is it really a problem, but that's the situation from which we argue. So we cannot really bring in the working group chair except as somebody who's making technically meritful comments fueled by input from the working group or something, but they are not part of this process.
Thank you, Karsten. I want to take up something that Alexei put into the chat that I think is quite important, and that there is a distinction here between what this document will recommend for the creation and maintenance of future registries and what this document says about past registries. And what I'm hearing is that for prospective work, for registries which have yet to be created, the working group seems to have rough consensus that the document should declare what specification types are acceptable for the registry when it selects specification required as a choice. So it should describe what kinds of documents are acceptable specifications when it says specification required. I would like somebody to volunteer to write that text for the prospective and send it to the working group mailing list. Who's willing? Paul, thank you very much. The next piece is what happens for retrospective registries. And what I'm hearing is that people are uncomfortable with a designated expert making this call for retrospective registries alone. And I propose then that this document say that in those cases, the designated expert shall work with the cognizant AD to identify a method of informing the community. Now, if there is an active working group, that's almost certainly going to be tell the active working group. If there is no active working group and the working group has been closed, I'm thinking of our lovely friends from EDI Int who came back after 20 years. They may need to work with the AD to figure out a way to discuss this with the community. But at that point, the designated expert and the AD work together to figure out how to poll the community about whether this is acceptable or not. That gives us a clear marking line. After the publication, we know what should happen. And before the publication, we have a process by which the designated expert consults somebody else, eliminating this question of secrecy, to identify a method for talking to the community. As a next step for what should go in the document, is there somebody willing to write that up so that we can talk about that? Because we need actual text and my nattering and my line doesn't qualify. I saw Rich. So the prospective text will come from Paul, the retrospective text will come from Rich, and the action item is to send them to the mailing list for discussion so that we can then iterate on that as a next step. Okay, there was discussion from both Barry and Karsten that this same retrospective versus prospective split and the same basic function should be true for the second and third bullet points on this first slide as well. Is there anybody who disagrees with that approach? I don't see anybody in the room and I don't see anybody in the chat. So I think that kind of closes out the first three. Now, Barry, you made a comment earlier, shouldn't IANA investigate storing specs, possibly republishing with permission? And you noted it's going to be a long process. I guess the question to the working group is there anybody in the working group who objects to them investigating it and identifying the amount of effort it would require? Paul, do you want to get up to the mic? Please enter the queue. Sorry, Barry, you are already in queue. Sorry, do you want to speak to this point or?
Actually, I was just going to ask something about the proposal you just made that Rich agreed to write up text for. Do you want to have any discussion of that now or just wait until?
I think having the actual text to iterate on is going to be more productive, if you don't mind, given the constraints in today's meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Then I'll just say, Rich, when you write up some text, consider what the default situation ought to be, and then we can discuss that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say was about the transparency. There are classes of registries we already have. The one used for .well known, the OAuth ones, the Jose ones, some others, that there's a mailing list that's public on which the discussions about registrations occur, which is a good model in some ways. It was designed, I think, by Mark Nottingham exactly to facilitate observability of the discussions.
Yeah, the use of mailing lists like that predates .well known by quite some time, but It's something that a working group can do in its specification of a registry. And so if you wish to comment on the text for prospective registration policy, once Paul has written it to suggest text around that, please do. Paul, you're next.
Going to the question, should IANA investigate storing specs? I have a couple reasons why I think this is a very bad idea. One is that IANA is busy. It is not clear which specs need to, like, we are assuming that some developer looking at a registry sees a link to a spec or a name of a spec and goes, oh my God, I need that, and is unable to find it. Out of, again, the 4,500 registries and such, I believe that this would be onerous. But the second reason is, let's say IANA does do this investigation, finds some specs to be able to do that for, there will be an expectation that they do it on every goddamn thing. And I don't think, yeah, oh yeah, if somebody says, but that registry has it and we should as well. So I think we are heavily overloading IANA for a need that a few people have, where they legitimately go to a registry, look at a registration and can't get it. But we're not going to know those ahead of time. And so I think that leaving the status quo of how it's been done should be left there until we have a list of requirements.
So I have Karsten, Kim, and Barry Liebe in queue.
Yeah, just a very quick comment on this phrasing, storing specs. So for instance, we have one registry with one specification that is part of the IPFS definition. And seriously, I cannot tell you how many of these documents you actually need to understand why the specification was met. So it's not just following the link and caching the result. It's actually going through that tree out there and see which parts, which documents constitute the stable specification.
Before the next speaker, we need somebody to take over taking the notes for a few moments. May I ask somebody to step up for like 10 minutes or so? Just 5 minutes or so. Can somebody step into the hedgestock so that Pete can step away from the room? Okay, thank you. Kim, you're up.
So in terms of IANA potentially storing specifications, I see this as not necessarily desirable by us, but it would be fulfilling the intent of specification required, which according to the current document is there needs to be a permanent and stable reference for the basis on which an assignment has been made. And what worries me is when we look at the previous bullet point, allowing things like GitHub pages, is that that is not a permanent and stable reference. I think at least with internet drafts, setting aside what their status is, like the content of a particular version of a draft is stable and is permanent. But if we're starting to reference ephemeral locations online, it drifts further and further away from that requirement. So ideally, IANA storing anything would not be necessary if there could always be references to something that is permanent. If we could get there, I think we could eliminate this requirement, but I think that's what this potentially would fulfill, is there's no way of having some kind of permanent, reliable reference for a particular allocation, that could be one way of fulfilling that need.
Or just say no.
Barry?
Or just say no, said Mike. Responding to Paul, I think the use case that I'm thinking of, and it's why I said about snapshotting versus following updates, is not that you can't find the document anymore, but that the version you find is substantially different from what we meant to refer to. And I'm concerned about that, and that's why I think we should pursue this. But you're right, it is a significant burden on IANA.
Ted Hardy from a different mic. I as an individual, believe that we need to split this question up from storing specs and possibly republishing, because there are two different burdens. And that the burden of storing a spec can be somebody emailed you an attachment and you kept the email. And it doesn't need to be more than that to meet the goal that Kim just laid out, right? If somebody comes back to IANA and said, on what basis was this made? You can bring up and display the specification as it was at the time. And if anybody says this isn't required anymore because the new version of the spec doesn't need it or whatever, then you can work through it because you have an archival copy of what was there at the time. I think the second question of republishing is a rat's nest of enormous proportions, because the right to republish may be very, very difficult to get, and it will vary enormously by the different organizations which wrote the original document, even by the licenses which are attached to something in GitHub. So I think I would like us to consider just saying IANA investigate storing specs which are provided as part of a registration process, but not necessarily then making those publicly available unless there is a query which requires access to the spec to answer the query. And I think that will get us past some of the issues we have with people who don't want us republishing their specs because they're proprietary to them and they charge for them or for some other reason. In other words, I want to split this into two questions where, as an individual, I believe the answer to the first question is investigate storing them, yes. Investigate republishing, oh no. And now I will get off my individual hat and go sit down and put on a different hat.
Paul Hoffman, I want Ted to respond to that with something that Barry said just before that, which is some specification required are for an individual version and some of them is for the series. IANA doesn't know that when they're investigating storing the specs. And in fact, I'm not convinced that most expert reviewers know that when they are in fact looking at it. And therefore, I believe IANA investigating could actually come up with the exactly wrong answer without them knowing it.
And this is Barry Leva. To that point, the idea that somebody doing an implementation of something they found in the registry and they want to implement that extension or whatever needs to be able to refer to an interoperable version of that reference that was valid at the time the registration was made. If they can't look at that version and they can only see the current version wherever it is, they may wind up implementing something that's not interoperable with what everybody else has done.
So Barry, can I ask a clarifying question? So I think in most cases, we could answer that by having the registry note the time at which the registration was made and reference the specification. That doesn't mean republishing, but it might be a pointer to something that that person then cannot access.
That would help.
And what would happen in that instance is that the person would then know they did not have access to the document and would then work out whether they needed to go pay for it, they needed to go find a previous version, they needed to update their understanding or go request those people confirm that the new version does that.
That would be a reasonable compromise that would probably
Okay.
work.
I believe in most cases now, and Kim, maybe you can confirm this, IANA tracks the date, whether it's in the public page or not. Yeah, so that data is actually present for a lot of these, so that might be a way forward here. I see Mike and Karsten.
Yeah, Mike Jones. It's my viewpoint that if something's specification required, it's the job of the registrant to provide a stable reference and for it to mean just that. It is not our job to solve the problem if in fact they failed to live up to their responsibilities. I say no to any registrations if it doesn't already have a stable reference, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, there's not a problem for us to solve by storing documents that it's somebody else's responsibility to store. Thank you.
Casper, on your considerations about attacks aside, I completely agree with Mike. If we require a stable specification, there should be a stable specification. And that's not the newest version of Bluetooth, but it's a very specific document that will have an archival quality in 5 years from now. So of course, there are tons of registries out there not doing that. So that's maybe a potential mistake that needs to be addressed separately. But the stable specification should be a stable specification.
So I'll point out that the question just below this is one of the reasons why this comes up, right? That we have an issue where an organization might need a value prior to a permanent specification being made public. And at that point, you have this deadlock. They need the value, and they can't provide a public access to it until they have the value. And that this instance where IANA might get a preprint, let us say, and store that until the public value is assigned them and the public specification is available is in order to create, at least in one use case, that bridging function.
Yeah, and that's okay. And I've been involved in that with other standards organizations where, as a designated expert, I would want the URL that it's going to be at. And for instance, for COSE numbers, they can't even publish until the numbers are assigned. So there is a chicken and egg. We do have to address that. Experts have been addressing it in practice by saying, we'll give you these numbers provisionally that you're going to publish at the URL you stated. But that's legitimate, but that's not the general case of storing everything. So there's email in the designated experts inbox and in IANA's inbox that documents what the to be published document is going to be.
And I think that's one of the use cases we're talking about here. So I think that one of the things that we want to say again for prospective registries, what's going to happen going forward is that we will say that this is permitted in the case where, and then a working group has to say, when is it permitted? And the default might well be when a permanent specification depends on the presence of this identifier prior to publication. And that would be a valid thing for an IANA registry section to have in it. But we don't want to circumscribe the working group's decision to say when it might else. So I think the answer here is, again, we're looking for text for the future that says what happens if somebody, as a working group editor, wants to write an IANA specification which permits this, what should that text look like? And are you raising your hand to write perspective text?
I'm going to quote perspective text, and I might be willing to write it again. There's plenty.
Just don't say it at the mic. We want to write it down and send it to mailing list. Because
I want to put an idea in people's heads.
Okay.
Which is, there's plenty of registries that say the designated expert may approve the registration when they're satisfied that the permanent reference will be published. And that's very workable. I've been involved in many of those.
Okay, and if I read you correctly, what you're going to send to the mailing list for discussion will not include cases where there is never a permanent public reference.
Correct.
Even if there is a permanent reference.
I would prohibit those. And I hate to say this, I have a client call right now. I have to step out, but I'll be back. Thank you.
All right. Well, I will point out that we have had other cases in the past where there have been permanent stable references which were not made public because they were associated with governments and that governments didn't let them be public. And Mike sighs deeply and says, and then there's ISO, at which point we turn to Rich, who will hopefully not sigh deeply on that.
I can repeat the size about ISO. No, there are registries, TLS and NTP have registries that allow expired drafts. And part of that, just because I don't think most people in this room are familiar with that kind of concept, that says, here's how to use this cryptography that is or here's how to use this time source that is specified somewhere else or available off the shelf. And it's never going to change. And it's okay if the document expires. And we did that explicitly because we wanted to not wait for the working group to finish the drafts and get them as RFCs. And also in TLS, we're having a fight with whether or not we actually need to have a draft for some of these things. Like, do I need a draft that says, here's how to use FIPS 204 if all I'm saying is use FIPS 204? Or do I, if we had to have a non-expired document that was not an internet draft that could potentially, that will eventually expire, post-quantum key exchange would not happen now. It would not happen for another year or two, and that's probably too long.
I have Peter and Murray.
Peter Koch again. So just one remark to this question of whether it makes sense to put the obligation to keep that stable reference on the registrant or the entity asking for the code point or not. Again, I think that depends very much on what the purpose of choosing this particular policy is and what the what that identifier space looks like or what properties it has. If there is code point scarcity, then that might be completely different from cases where there is no scarcity because we have strings and somebody is not necessarily interested in interoperability, but just grabs the point for, well, to operate collision free, for example. So again, I think that's not a question that can be answered the same way all over this wide variety of existing or potential future registries.
Thank you. And I don't think anybody's arguing that one size is going to fit all here, but I think we're trying to make sure we understand what the universe is so that we write what may be in the IANA Considerations document that a working group should produce.
At the risk of getting booed, I have a question back for Rich. I asked for that, didn't I? The problem you described, it strikes me as would be solved by the idea of a provisional versus permanent thing. Would that not have worked in the case that you described?
Yeah, it probably would not have worked because, yeah, provisional implies a change. And since the drafts, the working group knew that the ML Chem 25519 draft, off the top of my head, was never going to change. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter if it proceeded through the rest of the publication process. And there were some other things in the IETF, in the TLS registries and the IANA registries.
So it's a question of, sorry, so it's a question of effort, not that the thing you're trying to specify will change some point. It's just, that's good enough. Why do we have to do the extra work? Is that what I'm hearing?
And the extra work being the TLS or NTP working group, the IESG, the RPC, et cetera. Yeah, it's not just the small group of people.
Thanks. Paul.
Ted, I know you're trying to close this out, but I want to come back to something that I said. We don't understand the need here. We know that developers need a stable spec for a certain amount of time, but we also know that there are plenty of places where those stable specs are gone, and yet they develop anyways because they intelligently go and look at a competitor's code or whatever. I don't think that all of this effort here that we're spending is good effort until we know the needs for the long-term specs beyond the obvious ones. The obvious ones are taken care of. They're RFCs, they are the final version of a draft, things like that. We understand those really well. We don't understand the needs for the other ones, even though we have failure cases, even though people who had a spec published pulled it back. And by the way, Rich sighed about ISO, I can sigh about the ITU. We know that that has happened, and yet we have not seen any hugely negative thing about it. So I propose we actually don't spend any time on this. We don't ask IANA to investigate. And if we can see a pattern at some point where this has failed, then we step in.
think the bottom bullet point on this indicates a use case that IANA has seen in the past. Kim, Amanda, is that correct? Where you've had the need to get confirmation that a spec existed in order to avoid this deadlock of the value before publication. Is that correct? Can I ask one of you to go to the mic?
So what we've run into is typically we'll have to ask, can you give us a pre-publication spec that we can link to, something like that. I don't recall whether an expert has said, go ahead and publish for now and add the spec later. That I couldn't tell you.
Okay, and so I think at this point, I'm going to ask the working group if we can say that whatever IANA does now in cases like this to confirm with the expert that this specification will exist appropriately does not need any further work at this point. Does anybody in the room or in the offline, in the online group want to argue that we do need additional work on the storing specs now beyond what IANA already does? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody step to the mic line or raise their hand in the tool for that. So it sounds like the answer for this is not at this time, or should IANA investigate storing specs? And it sounds like what IANA is doing right now with values for before publication is considered adequate by the group. So we have the first slide done. Congratulations, everybody. It's taken an hour. And we have gotten through the confirmation that the first, we're going to get text for the first three, and the answers for the fourth and fifth. Other registration procedures. Now this proposes first come, first serve with URL, first come, first serve with expert review, and an approach to combining IETF and first come, first serve procedures in a registry of strings without altering the first come, first serve strings, e.g. by adding a VND prefix. Do people have any comments with respect to these proposed additions? People are adding themselves in the queue in real time. If you're remote, it looks like Barry and Alexi will have comments. Barry.
So this is Barry Lieba. I'm one of the goals that we had with setting up the predefined policies was to come up with things that worked for most stuff and the ability to specify variations in your document. So you could always, you can today say first come, first serve, and these fields are required in the registration. And so a URL would be something that you could say. When you start adding a separate defined policy for first come, serve, first serve with this variation and that variation and the other variation, it gets very unwieldy. And I don't think it's necessary. I'd rather just give the flexibility of saying, here's a general policy and you can specify details beyond that. I think, for instance, first come, first serve with expert review is silly. It's expert review is what that one is, and things like that. So I would object to, I at least mildly object to getting too much into a lot of variations on similar policies.
Alexi.
Yeah, I think I will second that. Can I just ask a silly question? What is first come with the URL? What exactly is this? Yeah, just go.
Something that resolves, something that is reachable. We can really
Come to the mic and give an example.
So this came about because people would sometimes use the specification required policy when they didn't actually need a spec that needed to be reviewed. or they'd say first come, first serve, but they would include a requirement for a spec with certain technical qualifications that we couldn't review for them. So I think the purpose of this was more to include the explanation and then to offer the registration procedure.
Karsten.
I agree with what Barry said, as long as it includes the too much. Of course, I'm not in favor of doing too much of something. The question is, which of these are actually useful enough to be reused a lot? And well, my personal experiences with expert review variants, of course, not of FCSS, that doesn't make sense, but of the RFC required standards action, and what was the third one? These really make a lot of sense. And yeah, we can continue putting in the boilerplate we have developed for this. Other people will have other boilerplate. People will work hard to understand whether that's the same or the different thing, or we could just have them in the document.
Okay, there's nobody else in queue, and I'm going to ask Barry a question. Barry, can I ask you to review the current draft and see if there's any text you would like to offer the working group that indicate examples of how people could write policies that do not have specific registration categories now, that would enable them to understand how they would achieve this without us creating a new category. Yeah, okay, so Barry is taking the action item to write text to help people understand how they would achieve these when required, rather than us writing text to create these new categories. And that's the resolution to this. Any objections to that resolution? Okay, I'm not seeing any objection to that resolution for the moment. So that will, Barry will send that text to the mailing list and we'll iterate from there. So there are a couple of dragons on this page. So everybody get your shining shoots of armor and or put on your best princess clothes. I know I have a tiara I've been dying to bring out. So do status field examples entries need to be defined, grouped, pared down, removed? Any comments? Paul.
There be dragons, and I'm speaking first person here. The status field examples we started seeing them, well, both in TLS, but TLS actually had a very weak status. But DNS op has started putting strong statuses. We have very little experience with this. I think we're going to have a lot more. And I don't think we should be putting things in this document because we have little experience. But I believe we're going to have another document that's in, say, 2 to 4 years that says, we have now seen how this works and we suggest you do this. But right now, the two examples that I know of are TLS and DNS op, and they're radically different.
Okay, so there was several people who gave a thumbs up to Paul's comments. Barry has come to the mic, but I'd like to ask if anybody disagrees with that basic approach, if they could enter the mic after Barry to explain why they disagree. Barry.
This is Barry Lieba. To follow on to what Paul said, the existing 8126, whatever it is, document says that there's a website that IANA has set up that has some further guidance. And I don't remember exactly what the wording of that is, but I set this up with Michelle when we wrote that document. And the intent of that was to put stuff like this on it, that here's what deprecated means, here's what obsoleted means, all of that can be there. And I think it's a good idea to follow through with that and put some of that detail outside of the RFC into some help with, help for implementers or for spec writers to understand these what this kind of stuff means. I think if we try to, we can always roll this into future revisions of BCP 26, but having that web page to collect this sort of information in between the revisions is useful.
Peter.
Yeah, Peter. So to offer the maybe opposite opinion, I think doing that for DNS was a mistake. The status doesn't belong into the IANA registry. The status is something that was traditionally done by the RFC editor, keeping status of documents, and we should find a similar solution for that. But that makes it's additional information that adds to the complexity of maintaining the registry. It's inconsistent. It is complicated because people don't understand, is this addressing the implementer or the operator? And actually, it's going to be weaponized in that case when helpful people come explaining to the world how they should deploy IETF protocols. So that the variety of reasons, again, I think it was a mistake to do that for the DNS, and we shouldn't copy that mistake. Thank you.
Okay, so I would summarize this as people seem to believe that this document in this iteration should be silent on this topic, and it will either be delayed to some later document 3 to 4 years out, according to Paul, or some adjunct document, according to Barry, or that it was all a mistake and we'll give up on it soon, according to Peter. But I'm not hearing anybody say we should put in any effort into elaborating this in this document. Is there anybody who disagrees with that conclusion? Okay, so this document will fall silent on this topic. And I guess that's to the editors. You don't need to send documented text to the thing. The next iteration of the document, which falls silent, will be reviewed by the working group under the normal course, and the minutes will reflect that it's planning to fall silent on this, and those two will stand for the working group consensus if one emerges. Does the module file subsection 13.3 need more information, a different approach? Does anybody have commentary on this?
Sorry, I didn't notice that we were closing point 2. Deprecated and obsoleted are two words like proposed standard that have a very different meaning to IETF insiders than to the outside world. Deprecated means this is going away. Be aware of that. When we use deprecate in the IETF, we mean this is still there and you can use it, but you shouldn't. Or this is still there and you can use it, but you shouldn't, but we know you will do anyway. So these are one of the two definitions of deprecated in the IETF. And we need to be careful with these words.
Roman.
Roman Diniliu, as an individual, I also didn't realize you were jumping past the second one. My contribution on the second one is we could debate the deprecated or obsoleted. I don't know how we're going to kind of resolve that. My reaction to that is I find it wildly inconsistent the way certain registries denote deprecated or obsoleted. Sometimes there's a separate column. Sometimes you're updating the text in an existing column and putting in parentheses. Sometimes you're doing it with a dash, and editorially it's just very unclean. So we should streamline it for new documents if possible.
Roman, do you want to write text for the working group on this point?
I would prefer if someone else could write that just to make my hands clean in terms of helping with consensus kinds of things. But if no one else is willing, I could do it.
Seeing no one leap to strangle the mic from your hands, I'm going to ask you to do it.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Jim Reed has realized that he cannot stand to the mic or he will be assigned something. Paul.
This bullet is unclear because deprecated is used in many different places in this draft. We've already sort of agreed with from the first bullet to pull it out in the place where we're talking about, is this line item deprecated or not? But there are actually registries that say deprecated and things like that. So I agree we need more thorough definitions, but I think it's definitions plural of here we mean this and here we mean that. I would love to get rid of most of those. So I think one proposal that we might make is don't use these words as much as we do.
Can you send text on that to Roman for him to incorporate? Yes. I mean, I'm sorry, I know people are kind of tittering that, but if we don't have people whose names are assigned to doing the work, it won't happen. And so we really have to get names. So your chairs ask for your forgiveness in advance if it seems like we're pushing for that. So returning then to point 3, does the module file subsection need more information, a different approach? May I ask if there are any comments on this? If there are no comments, I'm going to assume the answer is it does not need more information or a different approach. Does anybody object to that as a resolution? Oh, you'd like me to split the question? No.
I must admit I haven't read this for a while. This section only has questions. Questions to me imply we need more information.
So if you refer to the document and look at section 13.3, do you think it needs a rewrite, is this question? And since you're at the mic line, guess what I'm going to say if you think the answer is yes?
But obviously, clearly, it's yes, because it only has questions. So somebody should answer those questions. Or answer. We don't have to answer this question, which is also an answer.
So do you have any comments on this section based on what's in there?
I'm not enough of a young expert to have an informed opinion.
Okay, does anybody online or in the room? Oh, Paul, you're.
I propose we strike this section. That is, they already have, modules and stuff like that. Until we hear that there is a need for something more, take it out. They can add different procedures later. I don't think that putting anything here about how do they do the modules, how do we help them, is going to be applicable widely, and they can just have their own procedure. I mean, I'm going back to, and maybe not everyone agrees with this, of trust IANA to do the right thing when we haven't told them how to do stuff.
Okay, so the different approach here is strike it.
The text that we have came from somewhere. Does it feel like we're solving a problem? You felt like you needed this. I'm looking at Amanda for everybody else. The text that's there was there because you felt like this additional stuff was needed. Is it? It was suggested, I think, by Ned that we have something to address this and to refer to 8407 this.
Okay. For folks who couldn't hear, it was suggested by Med to include this text to address this because of 8147 bis. Is that 8407? Yep. Sorry, I can't have the draft open because I'm operating this. So, okay. So it sounds like there might be a reason not to strike it, but there's nobody arguing for a major rewrite. Okay, the chairs will take the action item to confirm with Med, given the current status of the document, whether they still believe this is needed or whether they would be okay if it were struck. Pete, please note that we have taken that action item as chairs, and we will go from there. Karsten.
Well, the question really is, do we need to delay this document until we understand what our questions are? And I would say no. I think I'm agreeing with Paul here. So this is an effort that is needed. There's no doubt that this is needed, but it's not something we should do in this phase. There should be another phase where we improve the way we are handling files in conjunction with specifications.
Okay, so we'll take the action item to talk to Med about that and see whether that's an acceptable answer, that it moves out of this document to some later time. Amanda, did you have a? Okay. Amanda is joining the queue.
I just wanted to clarify that the point of the section is not to answer the questions, but to tell authors, hey, here's some things you need to answer. You need to tell us if you're doing this. And I don't know if that's what was, if we're covering what was wanted there, but it's not asking the group to decide what the answers to the questions are.
Yeah, I can reach out to Med to sort this out with you.
Okay, so the resolution for this will be an offline discussion with, sounds like Murray, Amanda, and Ned to work through whether this needs to be in the next version of the document or not. And that resolves this one. All right, the last of the other issues is there information, as in section 14, language and formatting in the IC section, that's too trivial for this document and that should be moved to your online help page? Any opinions on this? I think the default is that it stays, but if there's anything anybody wishes to argue should move to online help because it's iterates too quickly or is too trivial for this document as a BCP, now would be the time to say so. Okay, for the notes, nobody leapt to the mic for that. So it sounds like the answer is there's no need to change the document in this direction. For the next version, we will not expect anything to move out toward an online help system instead. Okay, that comes to the end of this presentation. Thanks, everybody. Very useful. The next thing we're going to do is go back to our list of documents and start asking questions based on that. So I'm going to stop these slides and go back to these. Okay. Oh, sorry. Apparently in the chat, some people were asking who we were talking, and I was saying Med, not Ned. I apologize if I was a little bit unclear. MED, not NED.
Oh, yes. NED is long gone.
Yeah, sadly, Ned is no longer with us. If we need to consult him, we have no way of doing that. So, now we return to this. The original order that I put in here was 8126 bis. I think we're through that. Then Borman, draft Borman, draft Cleanson, and the 7120 bis and the early registries. Looking at the time, I guess the first question I'm going to ask is, people okay if I switch this order around and do draft Borman first? Right? Okay. So, Karsten, I guess the question has come up in the past of whether we wanted to make this an edit into 8126 bis or into one of the other documents, or do it as standalone. What's your current opinion as the document editor?
My current opinion is, if this working group decides not to create finer grained categories in 8126 bis, but wants the individual documents that are setting up registries to do this, then this document, as it is, as an internet draft, is exactly what we need to have the source of the copy paste. So there is no additional work required. People can just copy paste out of that internet draft. And yeah, that's how we solve that problem.
Okay, so remember, folks, just a few minutes ago, we agreed that Barry would work on text to go in 8126 bis to describe some of the mechanisms that a working group could take to create registry rules which did not necessarily fall within the current broad categories, the current repeatable categories. It sounds like what I'm hearing from Karsten is that he suggests we adopt this as an independent draft within the working group, not folded into any other draft, but that it be adopted as a standalone. Excuse me, that's a better word. We adopt it as a standalone draft and progress it within the working group as a standalone draft with examples for how a working group might do specific things. Are there comments on that way forward?
There's one more thing. There are also things about 7120 in that document. And we probably have to examine how the plumbing goes.
Yeah, so I think if we adopt this as a standalone draft, the stuff that would affect 7120 would probably move into the 7120 bis. And maybe what Barry was going to write in 8120 bis is instead replaced by a reference to this, and his text becomes edits to your draft.
Yeah, maybe. Let's
Okay.
talk about that.
So again, I want to, oh, Amanda, sorry.
There is some text in 8126 bis that covers this if we want to replace it with a reference while also keeping that in the registration procedure section. I think that's okay, but we would like to, since there are about 100 registries at this point that are doing this, we would like to establish some names, some regularized names. And a note about 7120 bis, though. I believe what's being referred to here is the fact that 7120 didn't specifically state that for registries that involve expert review, like specification required, IANA is going to go out and get those expert reviews. So that's described in Carson's draft. It's not in 8126 bis, but it is part of 7120 bis. There's text in there now that outlines this.
Would you prefer that that Carson's draft in essence be split and merged separately into 7120 bis and 8126 bis?
Well, I think the 7120 bis text in Carson's document is already fully covered in 7120 bis, I believe.
Okay.
But as for 8126 bis, whether we replace the current text with some of Carson's text or put a reference in that place, as long as we specify names to use with expert review, that could be okay.
Okay. So from my perspective, this is really not a semantic question at this point. It's a syntax question, right? We need to know how many documents we're going to use to accomplish this. And the two basic mechanisms are this gets folded in and we use one 8126 bis and 7120 bis having already been taken care of apparently, or we use two and 8126 bis has a reference to this. I believe it would be that it would be required, not informational. And as a result, I don't really see an advantage to having two documents here. Does anybody see an advantage to having two documents here for 8126 bis pointing out to this, or should we just process this document as edits to 8126 bis and 7120 bis?
I'd like to note that I don't necessarily see the time consideration here that would require that that document be published first, just because this has been in practice for so long.
Okay.
But
so you're fine with two docs or one doc?
We would prefer one doc.
You would prefer
but
one doc.
If the group prefers otherwise, we can make that work.
So Karsten is fine with one doc. Barry behind you is signaling yes. Is there anybody who would prefer to process this as a two doc approach? Barry, you're in line.
This is Barry Lebo. Yeah, I got in line to say that the text that I promised to write, as I envision it, and as I just looked at Karsten's document again, would subsume that. There'd be no reason to have that separate. So yes, let's just put it all together into BCP 26 bis.
Okay, so it sounds like then there's nobody objecting, and of course we'll go to the list to confirm that what we do is instead of adopting this as a standalone document, the appropriate text, we confirm that the 7120 bis already covers the text in your document, and you work with Barry on moving the 8126 bis text into the mailing list, and we'll then process it as an edit to 8126 bis. All right? Is there anybody who objects to that way forward? Okay, thank you very much. I think that handles this. John, are you still with us?
Yep.
Okay, so the next thing on our list then is your document. Given that discussion we just had, what's your preferred way forward for your document?
I think it's input into the single new document, and it's partly the document Barry, the notes or document Barry offered to write, and should be folded in there. So I think it's just input at this point, otherwise disappears.
Okay, so the proposal with this one is that once again, any text, any points made by this document get proposed as edit to 8126 bis rather than this being a standalone document. Does anybody object to that way forward? Okay, thank you both.
I think I've already suggested that on the mailing list, and there was no objection there either.
I'm glad to see that the room seems to agree with that, and it sounds like we have a way forward for both of these documents being proposed edits to 8126 bis. Let me thank both Karsten and John as editors of those documents for having brought them to the working group, because that's obviously valuable. Thank you very much for that. The next one on our list is 7120 bis. We know now that one of the actions we have with that is to confirm from Karsten that the issues in his document relative to 7120 bis are appropriately covered. Are there any other comments from the working group on the state of play of this current document? So I don't believe we've officially adopted this one as a working group document.
No, I've been meaning to point out, we actually issued calls for adoption for 8126 bis and 7120 bis in March, and they've been in that state for a while, so we can call them fully adopted, and Amanda can submit the IETF versions.
Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry that we dropped the ball on that, but I think both are adopted at this point. And the next question will be, is there anybody who sees, once we've confirmed with Karsten that the edits in his document are already in 7120 bis, is there anything preventing us from taking this to working group last call?
Taking what?
7120 bis, the new IETF version that will be emitted, taking it to working group last call. Okay, so after the IETF draft version is available, the working group chairs plan to issue a working group last call on this document. Nobody seems upset about that, so it's an action item for the chairs. Okay, we are making great progress here. Okay? The next document is IANABIS early registries, and we have not issued a working group call for adoption on that. Karsten, it looks like you have comments.
Yeah, I have a very simple comment. We need this.
Okay.
And actually, we need it soon.
Are there any other comments on this document? Are there any objections to the working group chairs issuing a call for adoption on this document? Okay, after the call for adoption is successful, the next question to the working group on the mailing list will be, is there any objection to us issuing a working group last call on this document? So folks might want to take a chance during the working group adoption call to start thinking that that question is coming very soon and to start considering whether or not they have issues that they want to raise with it for resolution relatively rapidly, because the intent would be to adopt it and then very quickly to move to working group last call on it. Does anybody object to that way forward?
So I'll mark it as a candidate for adoption right now. And
Yep.
then look. It's done.
All right. So just to review for these last two, the working group chairs has an action item for 7120 bis. After the draft IETF version is inserted as a successor to this, to start a working group last call. And after this meeting, we will issue a working group last call for early registries. And after presuming the success of that working group last call, sorry, I call for adoption. After any comments have been resolved from that, we would then consider moving to working group last call relatively rapidly. That's the current plan. I see Rich at the mic, but not in the queue. Rich, please go get in the queue.
Okay.
We're waiting for Rich to get in the queue. Patiently, patiently. We have all these tools, people.
Just punishment for not doing it in the first place.
Yeah, well, can't say it because I'm on the queue.
Rich, glad to see you.
Yeah, I got some words for you too. I think your description of what was going on with 7120 was off in that you earlier said that after Carson confirms that his text has been merged, then you would do the last call.
That's correct.
So I had to get into the queue to say you were wrong, and that's fine with me.
Okay. So sorry if I misspoke. We will confirm that the 7120 bis contains the edits that are in Karsten's document currently, and after that point, issue the working group last call. My apologies if I misspoke. Thank you for catching that. All right, so I think we have drained the queue on these documents, which was our goal for the agenda today. I want to thank everybody for doing that and ask the traditional question, is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing nothing, let me thank you all for joining us today, either in person or online, and we are adjourned.
Everything in bold in the headshot is a conclusion or an action.
Thank you so much, people.
I was just telling you, you seem to have reached